health was one based around our public health units, very much local capability and capacity for smaller outbreaks in those areas. So what we've had to rapidly do, of course, is get a national approach and bring that up to a national network, which we are doing. Secondly, the system that is being used is not one that's particularly easy to get information out of. So we're updating that ability to get information not just out of that system, which is called EpiServe, but also to be able to link it to our other health databases. So that work is happening apace. And third, as you pointed out, is what is the capacity, both within the public health units and also nationally. Now, you'll know we've set up the National Close Contact Tracing Centre, and over 200 people are trained to do that. And what we have been doing and are doing in the first few days again of this week is actually going around to the public health units to identify what are the needs, what are their specific needs to help increase the capability and capacity there. So I'm of the view that we are definitely on a pathway to having what I want is no less than a gold standard contact tracing end-to-end process, because that will be essential for us to be able to safely be within a level 3 and lower alert level.
So we're on a pathway, but we're not quite there yet.
How long it would take, the average length of time to contact trace at level 2, for example?
Well, what I can say is that the standard we are looking for is to be able to trace 80% of people within 3 days. Now, because the all of the current mechanism and the information is held locally at district health boards, we've had to collate that and do a sweep across them to get that information, and that information is being analysed this weekend and will help inform the decision by Cabinet tomorrow, and we will be able to release that in addition to the report by Dr. Verrall. It's only and the response we have made to that report that's being considered by Cabinet tomorrow, and so the intention, Prime Minister, I think, is to release it after the Cabinet's decision.
I think one thing that's really important to point out is that our success in contact tracing really comes down to the information that people provide. It also comes down to having a very, very swift testing regime. So if I could make two pleas to members of the public, if you even have a sniffle or the slightest sore throat, get a test. Because the sooner that we get on top of knowing that someone has the symptoms of COVID-19, the more successful then our isolation and contact tracing will be. The second thing is, to all New Zealanders, think about all your movements as if we may come and interview tomorrow and try and find out who you've been with. So in all of our contact tracing, having that local, I know everyone will think just simply moving to a national structure is the way to go, and yes, some standardisation of that data collection is really important, but unless you have that local knowledge on the ground about places, about people, about community groups, it makes your contact tracing less successful. We essentially have to do forensic interviews with people to find out where they've been, who they've been in contact with, and try and trace the origin of COVID-19. Now, if you then think about that happening at a large scale across the country, it's a very complex thing to be doing. We have systems in place that now we need to just make sure that we are shoring up even further, that we have greater surge capacity, that the testing turnaround is tight, that we have that gold standard everywhere.
How long will it take us to get to where you'd like us to be in terms of contact tracing?
I'm confident we're on a path to have that up and going within the next week. So
reading into that then, in terms of tomorrow's
Don't read
decision.
into anything.
yeah, what I would say is, if you look at our testing numbers, and this is the other thing is, I know a few weeks ago there was a lot of talk about testing rates here and so on. New Zealand's got one of the highest testing rates in the world, and that in particular that community testing we've been doing, as well as the wide testing right across all the regions and across different ethnic groups, shows that we've got a high level of confidence there isn't undetected community transmission ongoing or out there. And secondly, that our contact tracing must also be working quite effectively there on the ground. However, what you will see when we publish Dr. Verrall's report is there is a set of indicators that we want to be achieving around timeliness to make sure that we are achieving that gold standard.
Can we perhaps be expecting to stay in lockdown level 4 for another week until we get to that?
We're not going to get into any
Cabinet's
hypothetical
decision.
discussions today about a decision Cabinet will be making tomorrow. But I do think one important thing to keep in mind is we have contact tracing across the country. In every single part of New Zealand, we have the ability to contact trace. Some countries don't even have that. What we want is to make sure that we just get better and better and better, because it's one of many lines of defence that we need to have.
Has there been any progress on technology?
I'll come to you next.
Has there been any progress on technology, the app and that sort of thing? And is that something you would want in place before you went to level 2, for example?
No, not necessarily. We do see it as an addition, of course, but it will only ever supplement what needs to be excellent contact tracing on the ground. And that has become clear no matter where you look around the world. Singapore, often referred to as a place with using technology as part of their contact tracing, they themselves will be the first to admit that it does not solve all of your problems. There's accuracy over even how Bluetooth works in recognising who you're in close contact with. It relies on uptake of citizens. There are many reasons why, first and foremost, your foundation needs to be people supplemented by technology.
Technological.
We are, and we are still pursuing that. We continue to do work on that, but it will not be the basis on which a decision is made around changes in alert levels.
Australia and some European countries are testing sewage to see how widespread it is. Is that something that we can do? And if we can do it, is it something we would look at doing?
Yes, I'm not sure how many countries are actually doing it, and I'm not even sure Australia is, so I'd be interested to see that. It's one of the options that you can use as overall surveillance. For example, you'll know that there is testing of sewage done for illicit drugs to get an idea of whether and what the prevalence of use might be in specific communities. The RNA PCR testing is very sensitive, so you could do it. You could do sewage testing, but you would still need a reasonable rate of infections in the community to be able to detect it. ESR is just looking at that, how they would do that if it was to be part of our ongoing surveillance.
How confident are you that undetected community transmission is unlikely, and are you satisfied that there's currently sufficient data to back that up?
Well, that's one of the key decision points for Cabinet, so I don't want to preempt the advice we're giving to Cabinet. Again, just to reiterate that we have done a lot of testing in New Zealand, and particularly over these last 2 weeks, as we've seen the number of confirmed cases drop, recalling that virtually the vast majority of those cases in the last 3 weeks we've been able to link to existing cases, overseas travel or existing clusters. What we're particularly interested in is the results of the community testing we've done in the last few days and those cases that we haven't been able to pinpoint the source, to do some wider testing around them, and that will increasingly increase our level of confidence about the fact there is no undetected community transmission.
So you must be satisfied, or at least encouraged, by the community testing results.
I think they're encouraging, and that goes alongside the number of positive cases we're seeing each day, with that wide testing right across the country and across the range of ethnic groups as well.
On that Invercargill death, why has it taken so long to confirm it was COVID-19? And if this person was so ill, why weren't they in hospital?
Mm-hmm. So I'll just make some broad comments about that, because I do want to respect the family's privacy here. So this was someone who was being looked after in the community with daily check-ins. They were at home with family members and wasn't that clinically unwell, but then the circumstances around that person's passing were such that we felt it was important to get a really good understanding, because it looked like it could have been the first community death from COVID-19. So we requested a post-mortem to help just affirm what the cause of death was, and then that can help inform what our knowledge base is around how we manage people in the community with COVID-19, particularly if they have pre-existing respiratory conditions.
That mean you're going to change the advice for how you manage people within the community? Are you going to maybe more regularly put people in hospital just to be safe?
Well, I've asked for advice from our Chief Science Advisor, Dr. Ian Town, who is a respiratory physician, and he's going to work with some of his colleagues to look at what the learnings are there. So there are two things, yes, how we might manage people with pre-existing respiratory conditions, and also if people are at home with COVID-19, what sort of clinical check-in there might be regularly just to check on their condition. So it's part of informing our ongoing response to COVID-19.
In terms of in the context of the criteria that you've outlined for the Cabinet tomorrow, is there any capacity for the Cabinet to consider whether some industries, specific or explicitly carved out, might be able to go back to a level 3 type operation earlier than the rest of the country?
I think what has been important to us is that we've stuck really rigorously towards a principle-based framework that really has stuck to the approach that basing our decisions on public health, keeping in mind risk, is the best way that we can protect both the economy, livelihoods and people's well-being. So there is a risk assessment for everything that we do. We are very, very aware though, and it's not just businesses that have been in hibernation for the period of alert level 4, both small and large are feeling it, and we know that all too well. But ultimately what we've tried to do is create an alert level where we can move as a nation down in between rather than segmenting off different parts of the economy. What I would say to every business now though is, as I did at the time that we announced the alert levels, we're moving from essential only to safe only. So prepare yourself and your business, if you're not currently operating, to be in a position to be able to operate. Do that assessment around social distancing within your workplace. If you're a retail outlet, do the work around contactless commerce, because we want those who are able to safely open to safely resume when the time comes.
Are our quarantine measures and border control sufficient for a move to level 3?
Yes, absolutely. They're very, very rigorous. We have